The air was thick with tension, the kind that hums beneath the flicker of sterile lights and the restless shuffle of papers. Every eye in the chamber watched, waiting for the next verbal strike. Josh Hawley leaned back in his chair, a faint smirk tugging at his lips, the picture of confidence honed by years of political sparring. He'd just delivered a comment sharp enough to draw blood, a subtle jab meant to wound without consequence. Across from him, Jasmine Crockett didn't flinch. Her eyes steadied, calm, yet burning with something deeper than anger. For a heartbeat, the room held its breath, expecting the counterpunch. But instead, Crockett did the unthinkable. Her voice softened, not with weakness, but with deliberate grace. She spoke of understanding, of listening before condemning, of seeing the human being behind the title. The tone disarmed the entire panel. Chairs stopped creaking. Pens stopped moving. Even Hawley's smirk faltered, his jaw tightening as he realized this was not a debate. This was a reckoning of character. And in that suspended moment, beneath the cold light of politics, empathy became the sharpest weapon of all. But what Jasmine said next didn't just change the tone in that room. It changed the tone of the entire country. Washington hearings aren't built for heart. They're built for spectacle, an arena of microphones and ambition where words are wielded like blades. Every seat becomes a battlefield, every question a trap, every soundbite an audition for tomorrow's headlines. Inside that marble chamber, civility is often just choreography, and empathy rarely makes the script. Josh Hawley knew this theater well. Polished and precise, he carried himself like a man rehearsing for history. His tone clipped and deliberate, his gaze unwavering. Every gesture served a purpose, to project control, intellect, and the quiet menace of certainty. He wasn't there to listen, he was there to win. Cameras loved him for it. Across from him sat Jasmine Crockett, a contrast so vivid it almost broke the symmetry of the room. Where others raised their voices to command attention, she drew silence. Her presence carried warmth, but also an unspoken defiance. She refused to play the part expected of her. She wasn't sculpted for showmanship, she was forged in service, in neighborhoods where politics wasn't a performance, but a lifeline. That day's hearing wasn't just another round of partisan posturing, it was something more. A test of sincerity in a space designed for cynicism. Two forces, opposite in every sense, orbiting toward collision. And yet beneath all the tension and lights, something was brewing. A moment that would strip politics of its armor. Josh Hawley had built his brand on composure. Every syllable he spoke seemed measured, engineered to carry the weight of conviction, without the warmth of humanity. His voice was calm, deliberate, never raised, never rushed. It was the tone of a man who'd learned that quiet confidence could wound far more effectively than open anger. To his admirers, he was disciplined. To his critics, he was ice polished into eloquence. In hearings, he played the role of the moral sentinel, wrapping his arguments in the language of virtue. He spoke of integrity, of faith, of protecting American values. Yet beneath the moral varnish there lingered a faint chill, an undercurrent of condescension that made every statement feel like a test others were doomed to fail. His questions rarely sought answers, they sought dominance. Every raised eyebrow, every pause before a retort was part of the performance. The cameras adored him, the lighting caught the angles of his restraint, the careful pauses that suggested certainty, but what they didn't catch, the fleeting human flickers behind the eyes, was harder to script. There was something unreachable there, as if vulnerability had been trained out of him long ago. He could argue with precision, but connection was foreign territory. Opponents learned to guard themselves, because Hawley's mastery wasn't just in what he said, it was in how he made others doubt themselves. His confidence was magnetic, but his empathy absent. He could dismantle an argument like a surgeon, yet leave the truth bleeding. And so, when Jasmine Crockett sat across from him that day, the expectation was predictable. Another sparring match, another display of his unflinching logic against another opponent's emotion. But this time, something different hovered in the air, something he couldn't quantify or control. But the one thing Josh Hawley could never prepare for was being seen. Long before her name echoed through the halls of Congress, Jasmine Crockett's story was written in smaller rooms, the kind with flickering fluorescent lights and folding chairs pushed against the wall. She began her career in the neighborhoods most politicians forgot, where justice wasn't a headline, but a daily negotiation with exhaustion and hope. Her desk was often cluttered with case files and coffee stains, but to those who came through her door, she was a lifeline, the lawyer who listened when no one else did. She carried the lessons of her grandmother everywhere she went. Dignity, her grandmother would say, isn't something they can give you, it's what you decide to keep. Those words became her armor. They steadied her through late nights when the weight of injustice pressed against her chest, through courtrooms where her voice was dismissed as too young, too black, too female. Every time someone tried to quiet her, she spoke a little louder, not in anger, but in insistence that fairness still mattered. When she ran for office, it wasn't out of ambition, but necessity. She'd seen too many families broken by systems designed to forget them, too many neighbors fighting uphill battles alone. Politics, she decided, wasn't about power. It was about service, the kind that demands presence even when cameras aren't rolling. In Congress, she carried the rhythm of her community into rooms heavy with polished rhetoric. She didn't mimic the practiced tones of those around her. She spoke in her own cadence, clear, grounded, unapologetic. And when the tension rose, when male colleagues talked over her or pundits dismissed her as too emotional, she met it with the same calm defiance that had carried her through every courtroom. Her empathy was never softness, it was precision. She could see the pain behind bluster, the fear beneath arrogance. That was her quiet advantage. She led with understanding in places where others led with ego. And so, when Jasmine Crockett sat beneath the sterile lights of that hearing room, facing a man who embodied everything she'd spent her life challenging, she didn't see an enemy. She saw another human being and an opportunity to remind the nation what grace under pressure truly looks like. And on this day, in that marble-walled hearing room, all those years of compassion would be tested in one unforgettable exchange. The hearing had already dragged on for hours, a slow grind of rehearsed speeches and veiled hostility. But when Josh Hawley leaned forward, the air changed. His tone was clipped, calculated, a blade wrapped in politeness. He interrupted mid-sentence, voice cutting through the room with surgical precision. "Congresswoman," he began, the corners of his mouth curling just enough to register as a smirk. "Perhaps if you focused less on feelings and more on facts, this committee might actually make progress." The words hung there, a practiced insult disguised as advice. A few heads turned, some half smiles flashed. It was the kind of jab designed to rattle, to reassert control. And for a heartbeat, it worked. The room seemed to pivot toward Hawley's confidence, his mastery of the game. Jasmine Crockett didn't move. Her pen rested against the pad, unmoving. Her gaze stayed locked on him, not with fury, but with the kind of calm that unsettles the powerful. The rhythm of the room faltered. You could almost hear her heartbeat in the stillness, the collective inhale before a storm. "Is that what you think this is about, Senator?" she asked softly. Her voice carried even without volume, drawing attention like a whisper in a cathedral. Hawley blinked, surprised at her restraint. He leaned back, confident again, or pretending to be, Around them, the murmur built. Aides whispering, journalists scribbling, cameras tightening their focus. There was no longer a debate. It was a duel of presence, a quiet war between arrogance and resolve. The tension grew so thick that even silence felt electric. The chamber, once loud with overlapping voices, became a stage where one wrong move could break reputations. But instead of striking back with anger, Jasmine did something that no one, not even Hawley, could have predicted. Jasmine Crockett didn't raise her voice. She didn't lean forward or fire back. She simply inhaled, steady and deliberate, as though drawing patience from somewhere far older than the room itself. When she spoke, it wasn't a rebuttal. It was something quieter and far more dangerous. "Senator," she began, her tone warm but unwavering. "I hear what you're saying. I really do. You want things to be better, clearer, cleaner, easier. Don't we all?" The room went still. No one expected that word, here. She had met his jab not with defiance, but with understanding. It wasn't surrender. It was mastery. Hawley's brow furrowed slightly, unsure whether she was agreeing or dismantling him. Crockett continued, her words deliberate, her cadence unhurried. "But sometimes in our rush to be right, we forget to be real. We talk about facts as if they're separate from people, as if the numbers we debate aren't connected to lives that bleed, hope, and try again every day. That's where empathy lives, Senator. Not in weakness, but in the courage to remember what this job is supposed to mean." Hawley blinked, his lips parting just slightly, not in preparation to speak, but as if something inside him had shifted. The usual composure, the polished confidence faltered. The faint smirk that had framed his dominance softened into uncertainty. Crockett leaned forward, her voice still gentle. "You know, Senator, my grandmother used to tell me, dignity isn't how loud you speak. It's how steady you stay when someone's trying to shake you. I think we all forget that sometimes, even me." A murmur rippled through the chamber. It wasn't applause, not yet, just an exhale, a release of tension no one had realized they were holding. Hawley looked away for a moment, blinking hard, his composure fracturing in real time. For the first time, the performance had ended and the man remained. And then came the silence, the kind that carries weight. Even the cameras seemed to hesitate, unsure whether to zoom in or let the moment breathe. The stillness was electric. For once, the story wasn't about who had dominated whom. It was about what had just been revealed. Crockett sat back, her eyes never leaving him. There was no triumph in her expression, but only a kind of gentle sadness, the look of someone who understood that empathy often wounds before it heals. Across from her, Hawley swallowed hard. He nodded once, almost imperceptibly, as if conceding something far greater than a political point. Outside the chamber, within minutes, the clip began to spread. A staffer had uploaded it, raw, unedited, the perfect viral length. By the time the hearing adjourned, Twitter was on fire. Hashtags bloomed like wildfire. Hashtag Crockett moment. Hashtag empathy wins. Hashtag when she spoke. Commentators called it the day decency fought back. Edits flooded TikTok. Slow-motion replays of Hawley's reaction. Captions that read, "She didn't destroy him. She healed the room." News anchors replayed her words that evening, their voices hushed, almost reverent. Even conservative pundits struggled to spin it. The headline crawled across the screen, "Crockett's empathy stuns Capitol Hill." In homes across the country, people stopped scrolling. They saw something rare, not outrage, not performative fury, but humanity laid bare. One viewer commented, "For the first time in years, I felt proud to watch a hearing." And in the footage that would be replayed millions of times, Jasmine Crockett's final words echoed like a quiet promise. "We can argue policy all day, Senator, but at the end of it, we're still people, and people deserve to be seen." And as Hawley's face softened, the cameras caught what no one expected, the flicker of realization in a man the world thought unshakable. By nightfall, the internet was on fire. The clip of Jasmine Crockett's exchange with Josh Hawley had exploded across every platform, crossing ideological lines and time zones in a matter of hours. On X, the hashtag #EmpathyWins trended at #1, followed by hashtag #CrockettMoment and hashtag #WhenSheSpoke. Millions watched the 30-second clip of her calm, resonant words, and the way Hawley's expression seemed to break mid-frame, the smirk melting into something unguarded, almost human. TikTok flooded with edits layered over soft piano tracks, her quote, "We forget to be real," appearing in cursive across slow-motion replays. Creators stitched the clip with their own reflections. Veterans, teachers, mothers, young activists. One woman whispered tearfully into her phone camera, "I cried watching this. It's the first time I've seen compassion win on that floor." Comment sections turned into digital town halls. Some called it the moment empathy won. Others simply wrote, "Finally, a leader who listens." Late-night hosts replayed the footage, freezing on Hawley's face to analyze the millisecond of hesitation. "You can actually see the armor crack," one joked. But underneath the laughter, there was awe. Across political podcasts and YouTube panels, debates raged. Supporters praised Crockett's restraint as a new kind of strength, power without cruelty. Critics scrambled for spin, insisting that it was performance, not sincerity. But the more they argued, the clearer it became. The moment had escaped politics. It had become something cultural, something human. By dawn, the clip had been viewed over 40 million times. Students were quoting it in classrooms, preachers referenced it in Sunday sermons, and one op-ed simply titled, "She Saw Him," went viral for capturing what everyone felt but couldn't articulate. That for one rare instant, empathy outshone ego. And as the noise swelled online, the focus began to shift from the spectacle to something quieter, something personal. People weren't just reacting to Jasmine Crockett's words, they were rethinking what leadership could look like. But beyond the viral clips and headlines, something deeper was shifting, even within Josh Hawley himself. In the days that followed, Josh Hawley was unusually silent. No victory lap, no morning show appearances, no fiery statements to reclaim control of the narrative. Cameras caught him leaving the Capitol alone, his usual quick stride replaced with something slower, heavier. The man who once thrived under the spotlight now seemed to flinch from it, as if every flash reminded him of that moment, the one that refused to fade from public memory. Some said he'd been humiliated. Others whispered he was simply regrouping. But those who knew the language of quiet reflection saw something different, a man running out of defenses. Late one evening, alone in his office, maybe he rewatched the clip. Maybe he listened not to her words, but to the silence that followed them. The silence that felt like the country itself taking a breath. He'd built a career on precision and certainty, but in that stillness, he might have realized how little those things offered when the truth was emotional, not logical. Perhaps for the first time, he understood that conviction without compassion was a hollow victory. No statement ever came from him about the incident, no apology, no rebuttal. Yet when he next appeared in a hearing, his tone was different, measured still, but softer, less theater, more thought. The change was subtle, a pause before speaking, a willingness to listen when others had the floor. People noticed, and maybe he did too. Maybe that flicker, caught on camera, the one the internet replayed 1,000,000 times, wasn't embarrassment after all. Maybe it was recognition, because in the end, this wasn't just about two politicians. It was about all of us. The chamber may have emptied, but the echo of that moment lingered like a quiet anthem. Long after the arguments faded and the headlines cycled on, people still remembered the look on Jasmine Crockett's face. Calm, steady, unyielding in her grace. In a world addicted to outrage, she had done something revolutionary. She chose compassion. Empathy, so often dismissed as softness, revealed itself as the deepest form of courage. It takes strength to stay kind when you are provoked, to stay composed when the room dares you to break. That day, Jasmine Crockett proved that dignity doesn't whisper, it resounds. She showed that leadership isn't about volume or dominance, but about vision, the kind that sees through anger and still believes in humanity's better nature. Across America, people replayed her words not because they were dramatic, but because they were true. In every pause, in every steady breath, she reminded a weary nation that power without compassion is hollow, and that sometimes the most radical act is to remain decent when others have forgotten how. The camera fades on her face, calm and resolute, a faint smile, a silence heavy with meaning. Because maybe this is the kind of power we've been missing all along. The clip of Josh Hawley's stunned silence and Jasmine Crockett's quiet strength wasn't just a viral moment, it was a mirror. It reminded us that empathy still has the power to move even the most unshakable among us. If her grace stirred something in you, don't let it fade when the video ends. Share it. Talk about it. Be the echo of that calm, that courage, that choice to respond with heart instead of hate. Because every time we amplify compassion, we shift the tone, not just in politics, but in our everyday lives.